Hey everyone, Pedro here with CineMilled to talk to you today about balance. Now, this is obviously, the whole world revolves around balancing a gimbal. I'm a Steadicam operator. My whole world is balance. Now, frequently people ask me to do a balance video. There is 50,000 balance videos on YouTube. I never thought I should bother. People do seem to like how I explain things. So I figured I'd give it a try. I'm gonna try to make this short, because really the most important thing is not how to actually balance a gimbal. There's tons of videos, you can see those online. What I want to try to teach to you today in a very simple way is how to balance anything, and this essentially the general concept behind balance. What's neutral balance, what's bottom heaviness, what's top heaviness. If you really understand that, you'll be able to balance any gimbal really quickly. It's just sometimes some people watch the videos, but they don't grasp the concept. So that's what I'm going to talk to you today. I have a broom. Now, some people might laugh at this, but it's actually a way I found to really simply explain balance, the concept of balance. So a broom is a funny object because it's really light on one side and it's really heavy on the other. And a really easy way to describe how to balance something and what is top and bottom balance. So let me slide this out of the way for a second. And I have a little bit more room in order to show you guys this. So first, balancing something left to right, right? So you could take any object and balance it. So basically, if I hold it here, it drops, right? On the right. It's too heavy on the right. So I have slowly get closer to the balance point, right? So it's just like doing a wheelie on a bicycle or a motorcycle. You have to find the balance point. So the balance point is a point of neutrality. So it's a point of which something doesn't want to fall forward, it doesn't want to fall backwards, right? It's just like riding a wheelie. If you miss the balance point, you fall on your ass. So on this broom, if I slowly start moving closer to the balance point, one thing you'll notice is it'll move slower. So if I grab from the end, it's a very fast movement. If I grab closer to the balance point, it still moves down, but it moves down slower. So the slower it moves, you're going in the right direction. So let's keep moving down the broom. And now it's falling slower in the other direction. That means we've now passed the balance point. So right there, I'll fine tune it a little bit more. There, we've just found the balance point. I can now hold this on my finger and it's neither going to fall to one side or fall to the other side. I found the point of neutral balance. So different than a Steadicam. Steadicams usually they like to be, we will tune it to maybe it's more bottom heavy, maybe it's more top heavy. If you've been on set and you've seen a Steadicam operator balance his Steadicam, he'll do what's called a drop time test and to see how long it takes to get back to vertical. And he's essentially tuning how top heavy something is or how bottom heavy something is. And so on a gimbal, we don't want that. We want perfect neutral balance. So exactly what I just showed. You don't want it to be falling either to the left or to the right. You want it to be in perfect balance. So that's the quick explanation of left to right or fore and aft balance, right? Like moving the camera forward on the gimbal if it's falling forward or falling backwards. The other thing people have a hard time understanding is top heaviness and bottom heaviness. So it's the same concept. It's, you see, so that's bottom heavy and that is top heavy. It's the weight's on top, it wants to be at the bottom, right? It's gravity. Why is that important? So that is important because for lots of reasons, but mainly because of the pendulum effect. So if something is bottom heavy, like this broom, and I grab it from the top so it's even more bottom heavy, right? By adjusting the point at which you grab something, if you get closer to the balance point, you get more neutral. So if we go way off the balance point, it's going to be very bottom heavy. So when something's very bottom heavy and you move, it stays behind and then it swings forward and you get a pendulum effect. So right there, see? So that's no good. So on a gimbal, if something is not in proper top to bottom balance and there's a pendulum effect, when you move, the motors have to work really hard to stop the camera from pendulum. So that means you're going to waste more batteries and your gimbal's going to have to work harder. Now, if you have a big camera on your gimbal, it might even go limp because the motor may not have all the power to overcome the fact that you're not in proper balance. So like I just showed, there's the pendulum effect, right? So as I move my hand closer to the balance point, the pendulum effect decreases. So I'm almost at the balance point. You see there's still some pendulum. I get closer. Oh, I can feel it at this point. And then there you go. See, it doesn't pendulum in either direction. It is perfectly in neutral balance. So the important thing to understand about that is that when it's in perfect neutral balance, I'm requiring very little effort to keep it from moving at all. So just like if you grab, again, our trusty broom, and I grab it from the balance point, which we establish is somewhere around this zone, I don't have to use, I can use 2 fingertips, and whoops, there you go. I can use 2 fingertips and hold this for, geez, as long as I can, keep this up, but forever pretty much, right? I'm not exerting any force to keep this horizontal. What does that mean? That means on a gimbal, your gimbal is not wasting any electricity to keep your camera level. So this is why it's important to have a proper neutral balance on all your axes. So grab a broom and do what I'm showing you. Grab from the end of the broom now, right? So it's way out of balance. Now your wrist is, you're having to put a lot of work on your wrist to keep it from swinging down. That's what your motor's having to do. And it's gonna suck down your batteries really quickly. Because a lot of people think that just because you have a really powerful gimbal, oh, you don't need to balance it, I'll just turn it on and it'll power through the fact that it's out of balance. Yes, but the key word is that it's gonna power through it. And essentially you're gonna decrease the performance of your gimbal, even if your gimbal has the horsepower to sort of keep the camera balanced. So here's our Ronin. The best test to see if your camera's in balance, right now it's powered up. You can see here it's doing its job, right? The best test to see if you're in balance is to just turn off your gimbal. If you turn off your gimbal, notice nothing moved. If anything moved, if this camera flopped down, that axis is out of balance. If as soon as I turn off the power, this goes sideways on you, your horizon axis is out of balance. If you turn off and you do this and this moves, you're not in balance. Notice it didn't move. So right now, of course, this gimbal is in perfect neutral balance. In fact, when a gimbal is in perfect neutral balance, you can almost grab it and it will almost stabilize without any power. Look at the camera. It's not moving, right? So it almost works with no power if it's neutrally balanced. So that's what you want to achieve, because then your batteries last way longer. You have actual more motor power to overcome wind resistance on a car, for example. So, and then as you go to bigger, it may not matter if you have an A7 or a DSLR like I have here, but once you get to an Arri or a Red camera and a matte box and lens motors and a big PL lens, cinema lens, then the balance matters much more. It becomes exponentially more important. So, I can show you real quick the method I use, sort of what I go through to balance a gimbal. So I'm gonna throw everything way out of balance here, just so you got, randomly, not really paying attention to what I'm doing. I'm just throwing this whole thing out of balance here, and you can see what it's doing. It's totally off. And I'm going to now show you close up and go through how the steps I go through to balance a gimbal. But basically it's really straightforward. First, I balance the horizon axis, so I'm not fighting that. Then I balance the top to bottom balance of the tilt axis, and then I balance the fore and aft. But after I do that, what you have to understand also is that if something is very bottom heavy, it's going to try to keep that, whatever that is, level. So let me give you an example. I just moved this to the bottom. It's going to be very bottom heavy. Watch. Right? See how fast that's going down? It's because all the weight's at the bottom. It's way out of balance. Now, I'm going to take the camera dovetail and move it forward. Well, maybe that was too much to demonstrate my point. But so I just slid it all the way forward, and it's mostly still level. Does that mean the fore and aft is balanced? No. That means the fact that it's bottom heavy is masking, is hiding the fact that your fore and aft is out of balance. So the reason I bring that up is just to point out that one axis being out of balance can mask the symptoms of another axis being out of balance. So what you're going to see me go through, my process here is very simple. My first round through all of the axes is I just get it roughly in the right position, because the reality is once I get this tilt axis closer to neutral, it's going to exacerbate the fact that the tilt axis is out of balance. So I'm going to have to essentially go back and forth. Now, you don't have to do this too many times. You're going to see me balance this horrible out of balance gimbal that I just made here in a second. And you're going to see I'm going to get it balanced really quickly. But you're going to see me go back and forth between getting the tilt balanced and then, oh, the fore and aft is now out. I fix that, and then I go back to tilt, because once you move the fore and aft, it affects the tilt. Once you fix the tilt balance, it might affect the fore and aft, and then so you have to go back and forth a little bit. And once you do all that, then lastly I do the pan, because there's no point in doing that when you're moving this weight around. So now I'm going to show you a little bit closer look at how I get the gimbal balanced. All right, so when you start out, of course, everything's sort of flopping around and not in the right situation. The first thing I like to sort of work out is the horizon axis. And so obviously you can see we're heavy on the right side here. So you just loosen whatever mechanism, it's these clamps on the MoVI, and then you just slide left to right until things are nice and level. I think I can move it a little bit more. So one of the things I do is I'll put a finger on the other side and then I'll push, and that helps me get a very small adjustment, because if I don't use it, sometimes I go past where I want to be. So let's see, and yeah, that's pretty good. So once again, on the first pass, I don't get into too much, I don't waste too much time, because I know that once I get the whole thing more neutral, that's no longer going to be level. You know, even though it's pretty much level right now, it's because this is very bottom heavy, and that's masking the fact that the horizon's probably not level. So once again, you can see here our arms now look like they're level, but they're probably not. It's because this is very bottom heavy. So one of the techniques is to point the lens straight up and let go. And of course, you see how fast it fell. So just like the Broom, when things are moving fast, they're way out of adjustment. So in this case, we want to move the camera up on the tilt arms. And as you move them up, you'll feel this getting lighter. And yeah, no, not yet. And so when it goes the other direction, just like with the Broom, you went past the balance point. So we know now we got to go back this way. So just like before, I put my finger on the other side so that I can have make a smaller adjustment. So look at that. So now it's not falling backwards or forwards, so it seems to be in balance. So I'm going to lock that down so it doesn't move. And remember how the camera was fairly balanced before? Now I let go of it because the tilt is in balance, and it's definitely not in balance fore and aft. that was my point about the fact when something is bottom heavy, it can mask that other things are actually not in balance. So remember how we just also adjusted the horizon? You see how it's off? This is why I said don't waste too much time. Just get things roughly into position. So let's tweak that that side to side again. Oh, see, actually the fore and aft is so off that we can't even let go because it does this. So let's work on that a little bit. So there's the release for that. We need to move back and more. Oh, we went past it. We go forward a little bit more. Let me apply some pressure. And notice now that we got the other two axes neutral, now all of a sudden that horizon axis that looked perfect 2 seconds ago is off. You're not doing anything wrong. It's just what I mentioned earlier, where as soon as you go more neutral in one axis, it's gonna now show that you're off in the other. So no problem. We'll just loosen this guy, slide it sideways, and oh, we're a little off. So we just need to. So once you get closer, you're gonna want to make tiny adjustments. Tiny adjustments have a huge impact when you're very close to neutral. So there we go. So now we're much closer than we were. It's not falling forward, it's not falling back. So, and it's the horizon axis is pretty good. But now I'm gonna test the tilt axis, and my guess is that it's actually pretty good. So sometimes you'll see it move a little bit, so you can further tweak. So the goal with balancing is wherever you leave something, it stays. It doesn't matter what position I turn it to, it shouldn't move. So see, that's a 45. If it was moving, that means it's not in balance. So wherever you leave something, it should stay. And now if it moves a little bit, I mean, it's not the end of the world. You're pretty much in neutral balance, and you can play with it and notice it takes very little force to move things. So you can immediately see how your motors do very little work. And so now that that's all sorted out, what I'm going to do is adjust the pan axis. So I do this one last, unless it's way off, and then I get it closer. But so basically, on the Ronin here, we have this micro adjuster, which is really cool. You don't see it on some of the other gimbals, but it's a great feature to have. So what I do is I make sure my pan axis, my handles here are tight, and I induce a tilt angle, right? And so what happens is, you see how it's immediately falling in one direction. So once again, whenever something is moving in a direction and it's doing it fast, you know you're way off. So in this case, since it's falling down, that means the weight is down here. See, it's bottom heavy. So what do we need to do? We need to move the weight further up. So really simply, I move these knobs and then see what happens. See, now it's moving down, but it's doing it at a very slow rate. That means I'm very close to my balance point. So all I got to do is give it a small, tiny adjustment, and we're talking like a millimeter. See, it's still wanting to fall down a little bit, and so I'm going to give it a little tweak. And look, now it doesn't matter how much I change this angle, the pan always stays in its place. Remember how I said wherever you leave it, it should want to stay there? That's how you know you're in perfect balance. And of course, then I lock so nothing moves. So, you know, this brings up the final point, because now everything should be in pretty good balance, is that if you do have something where you now that you balanced, you turned it on and you shot, maybe you changed a battery, and then you turn off your gimbal and this points down, that probably means that something is moving. So you're going to notice right here, there's a little Allen in the center of the clamp. So these clamp systems, I think, for dovetails are horrible. Dovetails should always have an Allen going into it, and that's why our universal mounts don't have clamps. They don't apply enough pressure. This bronze pad eventually wears out, you're constantly having to fiddle with this Allen. So what I like to tell people is this is just for show, and when I find my balance point, I use the Allen tool and I really tighten the dovetail, because then it doesn't matter what I do, it's not going to slip. So with so many people, this is either misadjusted or they're not applying enough pressure, and then the plate slips, and then somehow an hour later when you go to change your battery, you're out of balance again. So there you have it, and that's basically how I balance a gimbal. Notice there is no power applied, and anywhere I move things, they will stay. Mostly, let's leave it right there. There, see? So this means it's in neutral balance and you're ready to shoot. And you noticed I took a little bit longer because I'm explaining things, but basically it shouldn't take that long at all, and you're ready to go. So that's it. Everyone, I hope you got a better understanding on how to balance your gimbal. This can apply to pretty much every gimbal out there. It's important to note newer gimbals like the Ronin 2 have axis locks that make this so much easier. You can lock out each axis and isolate it and do one at a time without one affecting the other. So that speeds things up. Also, the Ronin 2 has the micro adjustments, which makes things way easier. You know, one of the things people struggle with is they go too far. Oh, they go the other direction, they went too far. And so you have to like use little tricks and apply pressure and make sure you do small little adjustments, because as you saw, as you get closer to neutral, small changes have big effects. So having that micro adjustment that's on the Ronin 2 is really great. The tilted gravity gimbal also has that micro adjustment, so that's really cool. Let's hope that more future gimbals will have that. But you know, in the end, it doesn't matter. If you understand the concepts that I talked about in this video, you'll be able to balance everything, including a broom. So if you have any questions on the subject of balancing, please comment on the in the comment section below, and I'll do my best to answer it. If you'd like to see more videos on another subject, just let me know, and I'll do my best to get those videos done and help you guys out. So thanks for watching. Make sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook. We share plenty of really cool stuff. And thanks for the support, and I'll see you on the next one.
Now we know.
And knowing is half the battle.
G.I. Joe!